Pack your running shoes and your bug spray because these are the terrifying creatures recently discovered in South Africa. First on our list is the trapdoor spider. Nothing is creepier than spiders, right? While they are far from the biggest things you'll run into in South Africa, they are undoubtedly some of the scariest. There are thousands of different species that you can find in the African nation, but this newly discovered variant has a pretty shocking characteristic. As the name suggests, the trapdoor spider literally builds its home by carving out a small hole in the ground and then keeps the dug up dirt to be used as a hatch. If you are walking along a dusty path and are not looking down at your feet, you may accidentally step on a trapdoor spider's home without even knowing it. Just like a soldier would in battle, the spider will stay in its camouflage burrow and wait for unsuspecting prey to pass by. When it detects insects such as grasshoppers and beetles, it will push the lid off of its burrow and drag its meal into the hole to be devoured. It's an incredibly clever tactic, but it also means that this spider is incredibly dangerous. Moral of the story, look where you're going if you go for a stroll off the beaten path in South Africa. After that, we have the bat-eared fox. While this one might look like some sort of demented crossbreed that was created in a lab, it is in fact just another one of Mother Nature's crazy creations. So upon first glance, it's pretty obvious that there is a lot to take in with the bat-eared fox. For starters, it does not have that bright red fur we've all become accustomed to with other foxes. Instead, it has a very unique gray and white fur that resembles a wolf or a lynx. It also has an oddly shaped head that looks vastly different from other fox species. But of course, those strange ears that have earned the animal its very puzzling nickname are by far its main character trait. Considering all the weird bat species that are living in South Africa, it almost seems fitting that there is a creature that shares some of their characteristics. Bat foxes really seem to enjoy the company of other bat foxes though, as more than 70 of them have been recorded living together within just a single square mile. But even if they are friendly with one another, it doesn't take away from the fact that they are very strange looking. Up next is the bagworm moth caterpillar. So most caterpillars tend to go through the traditional route while evolving into a moth or a butterfly, but there is one particular species that you can find in South Africa that goes off the beaten path. The bagworm species construct their own little shelters on their back, which are made up of all sorts of different materials. This can include sand, soil, and sticks that are cleverly fastened together to create what looks like a log cabin. These special cases are known as bags, and they can sometimes be even bigger than the caterpillar itself if it decides that it wants to live in luxury. The bagworm species can be found all over South Africa, and they are a real sight to behold when they are crawling around with their neatly constructed homes on their backside. Once it's time to evolve, the bagworms will climb into their homes and follow the traditional evolutionary path of other caterpillars. Now, even with how cool they look, the bagworms do cause some problems. They are known to feast on trees while they are in their larvae stage, and this is considered one of the biggest threats to the conservation of South African forests. After that, we have the butcher bird. Alright, you might be thinking, what's so scary about this very normal looking bird? Well, it may not be of any threat to humans, there is still a very good reason why this bird is known as the butcher. The South African butcher bird is regarded as one of the most cunning and intelligent hunters in the world that uses a whole host of tricks to catch its prey. For starters, the bird will stay high in the trees and remain out of sight until it sees its opportunity to attack. It will use a clever tactic to mimic the charming songs of smaller birds that aren't as deadly, and this will give anything on the ground the sense that there is nothing to be afraid of. However, once this bird uses its fake song to lure in unsuspecting prey, it will swoop down from the trees and pick up its catch of the day. While all of those tactics are pretty scary, the real reason why it is known as the butcher is because of the way it eats its food. While smaller creatures are usually gobbled up pretty quickly, bigger ones will literally be picked apart piece by piece, as this bird really takes its time to enjoy its meal. Next on our list is the hammerhead bat. With so many different bat species living in South Africa, you're bound to find one that is vastly different from the others. While Africa is home to some of the weirdest bat species out there, the hammerhead holds the title as the wildest of the lot. Hammerheads are actually classified as megabats because they are so much bigger than their relatives. Part of that is thanks to its massive head that really looks like it has some horse DNA in it. This head can also be attributed to its incredibly loud honking call that it uses for mating and communication. And while it may not sound too appetizing, hammerheads are actually regularly hunted by locals because, as it turns turns out, they are tremendous sources of protein. However, this can sometimes prove to be incredibly dangerous, as hammerhead bats are believed to be natural reservoirs for the Ebola virus, which can be transmitted from animals to humans and could lead to a global pandemic. So while the hammerhead bat may seem appealing to some people, it's probably best to just leave them alone. Up next is the black rain frog. You might be thinking that frogs aren't the scariest looking things in the world, but this South African species might just give some people the chills. The black rain frogs that can be found in South Africa pretty much go against everything we thought we knew about this croaking creature. It has an incredibly grumpy looking face, but it also has a unique skin that is somewhat similar to an avocado. While most frog species are covered in warts, the black rain frog has a special bumpy dark skin that is covered in small knob ends, reminiscent of an avocado you would find in your local supermarket. But this special frog also has a bizarre shortcoming because it cannot hop like other frogs and is restricted to a much slower walk. And just because it wanted to be even more different from other frog species, the black rain type doesn't require water for nesting, as the females actually lay their eggs in underground nests while the males will defend it. And speaking of defense, the black rain frog can puff itself up to scare away anything that might even attempt to get at its babies. After that, we have the naked mole rat. As we've already seen, there's a lot of weird stuff running around South Africa, but not everything looks like it was genetically bred in the lab of a mad scientist. The naked mole rat is roughly 3 inches long and live in burrows in the Horn of Africa. Aside from their completely bald skin, these creepy rats have a ton of other distinctive features that separate them from the rest of the pack. They have no external ears, which makes it incredibly hard for them to hear, and they have the smallest of eyes, which means they are almost completely blind. Because of their lack of 2 essential senses, the naked mole rats have to rely on their strong sense of smell for detecting food and predators. The weird creatures also have a distinct society in place that is very reminiscent of worker ants. The rats will elect a queen to lead them, and this is decided through a series of fights that take place between multiple rats. After that is all said and done with and the dust has settled, the rest of the rats will be labeled as soldiers that will assist the queen in burrowing homes and gathering food. The naked mole rat is undoubtedly one of the wildest creatures you can find in South Africa. This next one is known as the tsetse fly. It shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone that flies can be incredibly dangerous. Aside from just being terribly annoying, they can also carry some of the worst diseases known to mankind. And down in South Africa, the one you will have to look out for the most is the tsetse fly. This nasty looking pest is a well-known carrier of a terrifying parasite that can cause a terrible sleep disorder in humans. The sleeping sickness has a long list of nasty symptoms, which includes fevers and muscle aches, and it can be life-threatening if it is not treated quickly. In fact, the sleeping sickness that is transmitted through tsetse flies is responsible for 10,000 lost lives every year. Perhaps the scariest part about the fly though is that it really does just look like a standard housefly. This makes it almost impossible to distinguish between the two and allows the deadly creature to blend in and launch an attack on unsuspecting humans. So long sleeves are highly recommended if you feel like taking a stroll through the South African wilderness. Next up, ancient humans. So while this creature obviously doesn't exist anymore, scientists have recently made a shocking discovery that an ancient human-like species was living in South Africa. Known as H. naledi, the ancient species was discovered by a research team led by anthropologist Lee Berger. They received a tip about some mysterious fossils that had been discovered in a cave system near Johannesburg and were sent to study where they came from. After running multiple tests on the fossils, Berger and his team were stunned when they discovered that they belonged to a 100,000-year-old species that was closely linked to humans. The H. naledi walked on 2 legs and had proportions that were similar to humans, but that was far from the most shocking thing the researchers managed to find. Through other discoveries made in the caves, Berger and his team found that this species was able to draw pictures on cave walls, and they were also burying their loved ones. This was a shocking discovery that could provide humans with even more insight into our evolution over the years. And finally, we have the prickly bush viper. While we know that dragons are mythical creatures that are restricted to living in our favorite books and movies, there are some creatures here on Earth that may have provided the inspiration for them. And one of those creatures is living in South Africa and is known as the prickly bush viper. While it may not be as big as a dragon and lacks the ability to fly, it has extremely keeled scales that cover its entire body from its tail to its head and give the snake a bristly and spiky appearance. appearance. While its appearance is pretty remarkable, there is literally more than meets the eye with this snake. This special kind of viper is actually one of the deadliest snakes on Earth, as it carries a lethal type of venom that it uses to strike its prey. These spiny bush viper's scales and bristles can also act as camouflage that allows it to perform sneak attacks on unsuspecting prey. But in case that isn't scary enough, it can also hang from tree branches and launch attacks from above. So while it may be tempting for some people to touch the snake's prickly scales, it's definitely not a very good idea. And that concludes our look at the terrifying creatures recently discovered in South Africa. Let us know which one you thought was the creepiest of the bunch in the comments below. Be sure to hit like and follow for more exciting videos.